I was sitting behind the wheel in a fake driver's cap when my daughter's fiancé climbed in with another woman and started planning her divorce. Not a breakup. Not a little cold feet before the wedding. A divorce. He said it plain as day, like he was talking about changing tires or renewing a driver's license. Once I marry Emily, Brandon said from the back seat, we don't rush anything. We wait long enough for the assets to settle. Then we start building the case. The woman beside him gave a short, bitter laugh. And what about her father? Brandon snorted. Rick Halstead, please. Men like that think money makes them smart. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. The fake mustache itched under my nose. The gray driver's cap sat low on my forehead, and the cheap reading glasses pinched the bridge of my nose. I kept my eyes on the road because if I looked in that rearview mirror for more than half a second, I was afraid I'd forget why I was there and pull that boy out of my friend's Lincoln by his collar. 3 weeks earlier, I still thought my biggest problem was learning how to be polite to the man my daughter wanted to marry. My name is Richard Halstead, but everybody calls me Rick. I'm 58 years old, born and raised in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and I own Halstead Heating and Air. These days, folks call me a business owner. Some even say entrepreneur, which always makes me feel like I ought to be wearing a scarf and speaking at a conference. Truth is, I started with a used Ford F-1501 Ladder 1 toolbox and more confidence than sense. I spent 30 years crawling through attics in July and kneeling beside dead furnaces in January. My hands never did go soft. Even after I hired crews and moved into an office, there was always a little grease under one nail, always some old scar across a knuckle. I didn't build a fortune, not the kind you see on television, but I built enough. Enough to give my wife Linda a comfortable life. Enough to send our only daughter Emily through college without loans. Enough to make sure she never had to stay with a man just because rent was due. Maybe that's why I was so scared when she brought Brandon Cole into our lives. Emily announced the engagement on a Sunday evening. Linda had made roast chicken corn casserole and green beans, the kind with sliced almonds because she says plain vegetables depress her. The Iowa Hawkeyes game was on low in the living room, mostly for background noise, and I was in the kitchen trying to tighten a loose cabinet handle that had been loose since Easter. Emily came in wearing that look children wear when they're grown, but still need your blessing. She was 27, a second-grade teacher, and in my mind, she was still the little girl who used to sit on my workbench and hand me screws one at a time. Dad, she said, can you put the screwdriver down for a second? Linda looked up from the stove. What happened? Emily held out her left hand. The ring caught the kitchen light before I even understood what I was seeing. Linda gasped and covered her mouth. Oh, sweetheart. Emily smiled so wide her eyes filled. He asked me last night, she said, at the Riverwalk in Des Moines. It was cold and I looked terrible, and he still got down on one knee. Linda rushed to hug her. I stood there holding a Phillips screwdriver like a fool. Then Emily looked over her mother's shoulder at me. Dad, she said softly, before you say anything, he's a good man. That hurt a little. Not because she said it, but because she felt she had to. I set the screwdriver on the counter. Then I looked forward to seeing it for myself. Linda shot me a look that meant behave. After 35 years of marriage, a man learns to read his wife's face like a weather report. Brandon came to dinner the following Friday. I'll give him this. The boy knew how to enter a room. He was 33, tall, clean-shaven, with dark hair combed just right, and a navy coat that fit like it had been made for him. He smelled expensive. Some sharp cologne that hit the air before he even took off his gloves. It covered the warmer smells in our kitchen chicken broth coffee, Linda's lemon dish soap, and for some reason that annoyed me. Mr. Halstead, he said, reaching out his hand. It's an honor. Honor. That was the first word that made me twitch. He shook firm, looked me in the eye, smiled just enough. Not too much. That was the thing about Brandon. He never overplayed the part. He praised Linda's cooking without sounding fake. He asked about my business without sounding nosy. He even remembered that Emily had told him I used to coach her softball team, though he called it baseball first and corrected himself with a charming little laugh. Linda liked him right away. Emily watched me all night waiting for the verdict. I tried, I truly did. Brandon helped clear the plates. He asked Linda if she needed more ice. He told Emily, sit down, sweetheart. I've got it, in a voice soft enough to pass for caring. But I noticed things. When Emily started telling us about a student in her class who had finally learned to read a full page by himself, Brandon interrupted and finished the story wrong. Emily laughed it off, but her smile dipped for half a second. When Linda asked Emily about wedding ideas, Brandon answered first. When I asked him how real estate was treating him in Des Moines, he gave a smooth answer about markets, relationships, and long-term wealth. It sounded impressive without saying much of anything. Then while Emily and Linda were in the dining room looking at the ring under better light, Brandon stood beside me near the sink and looked out toward the driveway where two of my company trucks were parked because one of my supervisors had dropped one off for maintenance. "You built all this yourself?" he asked. "Most of it," I said, "had help along the way." He smiled. "Men like you fascinate me, sir. You built something most people only dream of owning." Now there was nothing wrong with the sentence. On paper it was respectful, maybe even kind. But something in his eyes did not match his voice. It wasn't admiration. It was hunger. After he left, Linda rinsed the wine glasses and said, "Well," I leaned against the counter. "I don't know." She groaned. "Rick." I said, "I don't know. That's me being generous." He was polite. He was helpful. Emily is happy. He talks over her. "So do you when the Hawkeyes are losing?" "That's different." "Of course it is," she said, drying her hands. "Because you're you." I looked toward the front door, though Brandon was long gone. "He's too smooth." Linda laughed. "You've disliked every boy who ever stood within 6 feet of Emily." "That's not true." She raised one eyebrow. "All right," I said, "mostly true." She came over and touched my arm. "Honey, she's grown. You don't have to like everything. You do have to let her live." I knew she was right. That was the hard part. Still that night I lay awake and thought about Emily's face when she showed us the ring. I thought about all the evenings I had missed when she was little because somebody's heat went out or a nursing home needed emergency service. I had told myself I was doing it for my family, and I was, but time does not give refunds. Maybe I had spent years trying to protect Emily with money, and now the money had become the thing I needed to protect her from. A few days later, Linda caught me staring at Brandon's public social media page on my phone. She shook her head. "Oh, for heaven's sake." "I'm just looking." "You're investigating." A father is allowed to be curious. A father is allowed to ask questions. You're acting like a retired detective with bad knees. I said I want to know who he is when he doesn't know I'm watching. Linda laughed so hard she had to sit down at the kitchen table. "What are you going to do, Rick?" "Put on a fake mustache and drive him around town." I didn't answer right away. Her smile faded. "No." "Linda." "No, Rick. I know a guy." "You always know a guy. That's what worries me." The guy was Marty Delgado, an old friend who ran a small executive car service in Des Moines. Years ago, during a cold snap, I fixed his mother's furnace at 10 o'clock at night and refused to charge her. Marty never forgot it. When I called, he listened, sighed, and said, "Rick, this is the dumbest thing you've ever asked me." "Probably." "You understand, if this goes bad, I never heard of you." "Fair." He had a driver out sick that Thursday. One private client had booked several rides around Des Moines under the name Brandon Cole. I took it as a sign, not a holy one, more like the universe handing me a shovel and saying, "Go ahead, dig." Linda helped me with the disguise while making fun of me the whole time. Gray cap, cheap readers, old windbreaker, fake mustache from a costume store that smelled like glue and shame. She stepped back, looked me over and said, "You look like you sell suspicious lawn equipment at a flea market." "I'm trying to blend in." "You look like you're about to steal copper from a church basement." I almost backed out then. Not because I was scared of looking foolish. A man who has crawled through raccoon droppings to repair ductwork loses vanity early. I almost backed out because Emily would hate it. But I kept thinking of Brandon's eyes on my trucks, that hungry look. So Thursday morning I became Ray. The Lincoln smelled like leather floor mats and the Casey's coffee I bought at 6:30. The radio was playing low some talk show arguing about the Hawkeyes' offensive line. My palms were damp on the wheel. At 9:05, Brandon walked out of a glass front office building in Des Moines and slid into the back seat. He didn't recognize me. He barely looked at me. "Morning, Ray," he said, checking his phone. "Keep the heat low. I hate cars that smell like old coffee." I looked at my cup in the holder. "Yes, sir." For the first 20 minutes, he made calls. With important people, he was warm and confident. With everyone else, he was short. Then he leaned forward. "Make a stop near East Village," he said. "Don't put it in the app. I'll tip cash." My stomach tightened. I pulled up outside a boutique hotel with black awnings and big planters by the door. A woman in sunglasses came out carrying a small leather purse. She opened the back door, slid in beside him, and kissed him on the mouth. Not quick. Not friendly. Familiar. She pulled back and said, "I'm tired of waiting, Brandon. Either marry the teacher and get this done, or I walk." I kept both hands on the wheel. And for the first time since Emily showed me that ring, I stopped wondering if I was being unfair. I kept both hands on the steering wheel, stared through the windshield, and told myself not to move. That may sound easy. It wasn't. There are moments in a man's life when every old instinct rises up at once. The instinct to protect, the instinct to punish, the instinct to stop the hurt before it reaches the person you love. But I was not Rick Halstead in that car. I was Ray. Ray wore cheap glasses. Ray drove strangers around Des Moines. Ray kept his mouth shut when rich young men talked down to him. Ray did not have a daughter named Emily, who was wearing a diamond ring from the liar in the back seat. So I swallowed hard and pulled away from the curb. The woman took off her sunglasses and tossed them into her purse. She had dark hair cut just above her shoulders, red nails, and the kind of tired, pretty face that told me she had spent too many years waiting for a man to become what he promised. Brandon leaned back like he owned the car. "Relax, Tara," he said. "You're being dramatic." "Oh, am I?" she snapped. "You said she'd be begging for a wedding date by now." "She was." "Was." Her father started sniffing around. My fingers tightened around the wheel. Tara gave a bitter laugh. "The Furnace King." Brandon chuckled. HVAC. Heating and air. He acts like he built Rome because he put thermostats in half of Cedar Rapids. That one hit me in a place I wasn't expecting. I have heard plenty of jokes about my work. Dirty jobs invite easy jokes. But there was something about the way Brandon said it, like every hour I had spent sweating in attics, every winter night I had crawled out of bed to get heat, back into some stranger's house, was just a punchline to him. Tara leaned forward and looked at me through the gap between the front seats. "Can he hear us?" Brandon glanced at the back of my head. "Ray," he said. I looked up into the mirror for half a second. "Sir, you got the address." "Yes, sir." "You hard of hearing?" I let a pause sit there, then said, "My wife says I only hear what I want." Tara laughed. Brandon didn't. "Good," he said. "Stop at Starbucks first." There was one just off the next block. I pulled in. "Black coffee," he said. "Large. Tara wants oat milk, 2 pumps vanilla." He reached into his wallet and tossed a 20 over the seat. It landed near the gear shift like he was feeding a parking meter. "And don't take forever. I'm already late." I picked up the bill. "You want anything else?" He looked at my Casey's cup and smirked. "No, and throw that gas station coffee away before we get back in. The smell's awful." I stepped out of the car. Cold air hit my face, and for a second I just stood there beside the Lincoln, holding his $20 bill. The wind cut across the parking lot, carrying the smell of exhaust, wet pavement, and roasted coffee from inside the shop. I could have ended it right there. I could have opened the back door and told Brandon exactly who I was. I could have watched his smooth face crack. But then what? He'd deny everything. Tara would deny everything. Emily would say I humiliated her. Brandon would turn my anger into proof that I was controlling. So I walked into Starbucks like a hired driver and bought the coffee. When I came back, Brandon was on his phone scrolling. Tara was staring out the window. I handed the drinks back carefully. Brandon took his cup and said, "Careful with the lid. This Coke costs more than your week." Tara made a little sound, not quite a laugh, not quite shame. I shut my door, sat down, and let my right thumb rub the thick callus at the base of my index finger. That callus had been there so long it felt like part of my identity. Pipe wrenches, sheet metal compressor, panels, furnace doors, and freezing garages. 30 years of work pressed into one hard patch of skin. I pulled back onto the road. For a while, neither of them spoke. The radio was low. Some local host was talking about the Hawkeyes and whether the offensive line would hold up next season. Normal sounds. Normal morning. Then Tara said, "I hate this." Brandon sighed. "You hate everything that requires patience." "I hate knowing you're sleeping next to her." "I'm not sleeping next to her every night." "Don't insult me. I'm doing what we agreed to do." "No," she said. "We agreed you get close, get engaged, and move it along. Not play house with some school teacher like you forgot who was waiting." Brandon's voice changed. It went flatter, colder. Emily is not the goal. Emily is the door. My stomach turned. Tara said, "You sure she still doesn't know you knew about her father?" Brandon laughed. "She thinks she hid it. That's the beautiful part." I kept my eyes forward. He continued. "She told me her dad owns a heating and cooling company, like she was describing some little local shop with 3 vans and a secretary named Barb. She has no idea how easy it was to look him up." Tara said, "You said she doesn't act rich." "She doesn't. That's why she's perfect. She wears Target sweaters and drives a 6-year-old Subaru. She volunteers at school supply drives. She's got this whole thing about being independent." There was contempt in his voice, but also satisfaction. Like Emily's goodness was not something to admire. It was something to use. "That helps us," he said. "If I make the prenup sound like her father's idea, she'll hate it. She wants to prove she's her own woman." Tara was quiet a moment. "And the house. We pushed for a family gift. Nothing huge at first. A starter home. Something sweet. Something practical. Rick and Linda will want to help. Parents like that always do. Once my name is on it, we have shared property." I felt my throat tighten. He said it so calmly. Not like a man taking a risk. Like a man reading instructions. Tara asked, and then we wait. "How long?" 6 months, maybe 8. Long enough not to look obvious. "And you leave her?" "I don't leave her. Not at first. I create distance. I document problems. I save texts. I already have some." "What kind of texts?" "She gets anxious when her father pushes. She apologizes too much. She worries people only like her for money, which is hilarious, by the way." Tara laughed, but it sounded forced. Brandon said, "If she gets difficult, I start making notes. Emotional instability, family interference, pressure, control issues, I stay calm." People believe the calm person. I almost missed a green light. A horn blared behind me. Brandon leaned forward. "Ray, green means go." "Sorry," I muttered. Sun caught my eye. It was cloudy. He sat back. I reached down at the next light and pretended to adjust the heat. Really, I opened the voice recorder on my phone and slid it into the cup holder under a napkin. Marty's car had a dash cam, but a little red light kept blinking on it in a way I didn't trust. I needed something. Anything. Tara said, "What about her father's company?" "That's phase 2. "Phase 2, she repeated. "Listen to yourself." Brandon ignored that. "Rick has connections. Contractors, developers, city people, property managers. I get close. I let him think I admire him. Maybe he brings me in for legal work. Maybe he introduces me to people. Either way, I move up. He won't just hand you a job. He might if I marry his daughter. And if he doesn't..." Brandon gave a soft laugh. "Then I find leverage." The car felt smaller suddenly. He said companies like his always have something. Misclassified workers, permit shortcuts, old tax gray areas, safety complaints. I don't need a crime. I just need enough smoke to make a man like that pay to keep things quiet. Tara whispered, "You'd blackmail him." "I'd negotiate." My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. I thought about my foreman, my crews, men who had worked beside me for 20 years. Men who came to my house for 4th of July cookouts, brought their kids, teased Linda about making too much potato salad. I thought about payroll, insurance inspections, all the boring necessary things I had done right because families depended on me. And this boy with his polished shoes and clean fingernails wanted to dig around my life like a raccoon in a trash can. Tara said, "You're getting too comfortable." "No," Brandon said, "I'm getting close." "She loves you." "That's useful too." I stared at the road. That was the moment my anger changed. Before then, I had been mad like a father, hot, protective, personal. But hearing him call my daughter's love useful made something in me go still. When a furnace is about to fail, there's sometimes a silence before it kicks wrong. A pause that tells you the system is under strain. That was how I felt. Quiet but dangerous inside. Tara said in me. His voice softened just enough to be convincing. "You know it's always been you." She didn't answer. "I'm serious," he said. "Emily is temporary. You and I are the future. I just need the paperwork first." I turned into the circular drive of a country club outside Des Moines. Brandon straightened his coat and checked his hair and his phone camera. "Wait here," he told Tara. "I'll be 20 minutes. He stepped out, leaned down toward the front window and said, "Ray, keep the car warm and try not to make it smell like a truck stop." I nodded. "Yes, sir." He walked away like a man who had never once imagined consequences. Tara sat in the back seat watching him through the window. Then she pulled out her phone and made a call. Her voice dropped. "He thinks he's the only one keeping copies," she said. "He's not. If Brandon thinks he can play me too, he's out of his mind." I looked at her in the rearview mirror. For the first time, I realized Tara might not be innocent. But she might be useful. A minute later, she opened the door and stepped out. Before she left, she leaned toward me. "You didn't hear anything, right?" I kept my face dull and tired. "Ma'am," I said, "at my age, I barely hear my own knees." She laughed once, sharp and nervous, then walked toward the side entrance. I sat there with my phone still recording under a napkin, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. Emily was not engaged to a man. She was standing in front of a trap, and I was the only one who had heard it snap open. I didn't drive straight home after I dropped Brandon off. I should have. Linda was waiting. Emily was walking around somewhere with that ring on her finger, probably texting him heart emojis, while he sat in some country club, telling another man how honest and ambitious he was. But I couldn't go home yet. I pulled Marty's Lincoln into the back lot of a closed furniture store and sat there with both hands on the wheel listening to my own breathing. The recorder on my phone showed 38 minutes and 14 seconds. 38 minutes. That was all it took to turn my daughter's future from a wedding into a warning. I played back 10 seconds of it just to make sure the sound had caught. Brandon's voice came through under the faint hum of the car heater. "Emily is not the goal. Emily is the door." I shut it off. There are some words a father should not have to hear twice. When I got home, Linda was in the kitchen making tea, which told me she was worried. My wife only made hot tea in the middle of the day when somebody was sick, dying, or in trouble. She looked up ready to make one of her jokes about my mustache, but the joke disappeared before it reached her mouth. "Rick," she said, "what happened?" I pulled off the cap and set it on the counter. The fake mustache came next. It peeled off with a sting, leaving my upper lip red and ridiculous. Any other day, Linda would have laughed until she cried. That day, she didn't smile. I put my phone on the kitchen table and pressed play. For the first minute, she stood with her arms crossed. By the third minute, she sat down. By the time Brandon started talking about making Emily look unstable, Linda covered her mouth with both hands. "Oh my God," she whispered. I stopped the recording. "No," she said, "play the rest." So I did. She listened to the part about the starter home, the joint property, the family gift, my business, the leverage. She listened until Brandon said she loves you. That's useful too. Linda turned away from the table like she might be sick. "I want to drive over there right now," I said. "No." The word came out fast, sharp. I stared at her. "Linda." "No, Rick, no. He's with our daughter. And if you go over there acting like a bull with a nail in his hoof, he'll turn it on you before you get through the door." That made me angrier because she was right. He called her useful. I heard him. He's planning to ruin her. I heard that too. I slapped my palm on the table. The teacup rattled. Linda didn't flinch. "You built a company by fixing the problem," she said, "not by smashing the thermostat because the room was cold." I hated when she used my own life against me. I walked to the sink and gripped the edge. Outside, the backyard looked normal. Brown grass from late winter, empty flower pots by the patio, a squirrel running along the fence like he had urgent business. Normal life sitting there like nothing had changed. "How do we tell her?" I asked. Linda was quiet a moment. "Carefully. I have the recording. And Brandon already knows how to sound calm. Emily is in love. If you charge at her with proof, she may feel attacked before she feels rescued. She needs to know." "She does. But we need to remember something." Linda stood and came beside me. "He's had months to study her. We've had one morning of proof." That sentence stayed with me. Because Brandon had studied Emily, her independence, her fear of being wanted for money, her need to be trusted. He had taken the tender places in my daughter and drawn a map. I called Emily that evening. She didn't answer. 5 minutes later, she texted, "Can't talk right now. Brandon and I are making dinner. Everything okay?" I stared at that message too long. Linda said, "Don't do this over text." So I wrote, "Need to talk soon. Important. Love you." She didn't reply for nearly an hour. Then came, "Dad, did you have Brandon followed?" My stomach dropped. Linda saw my face. "What?" I handed her the phone. The second message came before either of us spoke. "He told me. He said you don't trust me and you're trying to dig up dirt on him. Is that true?" I sat down slowly. Brandon had moved first. That was when I understood just how good he was. He didn't wait for the storm. He built a roof over himself and pointed at me like I was the weather. I called Emily immediately. This time she answered, but her voice was tight. "Dad." "Emily, listen to me." "No, I need you to answer me. Did you have him followed?" I closed my eyes. I was concerned. "That's not an answer." Linda shook her head slightly, warning me not to lie. "Yes," I said, "in a way." In a way, Emily laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "What does that mean?" "It means I found out things you need to hear." "No, Brandon said you'd say that." "Emily, he said you would try to make it sound like protection. He said you still see me as a little girl who can't choose her own life." My chest hurt. "That's not true." "Then why are you acting like it?" I had no clean answer. She said, "Do you know how humiliating this is?" He was embarrassed. He was hurt. He said he's never had someone's family treat him like a criminal. "He's manipulating you." "Stop." Her voice broke on that one word. "Please stop. I love you, Dad, but I can't do this right now." The line went dead. For a long while, I just held the phone. Linda sat beside me. "He got to her first," I said. "Yes. And now I look like the villain." "For now." I turned toward her. "For now." Linda's face was pale but steady. Truth has weight. It just doesn't always land the first time. The next morning, Emily came by the house. I think part of her wanted to give me a chance. I also think Brandon had coached her. She stood in our living room with her coat still on purse over her shoulder, ready to leave before she had even sat down. I had printed nothing. I had prepared no speech. Maybe that was my mistake. "Dad," she said, "I need you to respect my boundaries." There was Brandon's language. I nodded. "All right. I am not a child. I know you love me. I know you worry. But hiring people or spying or whatever this is, it's not okay." "I agree." That surprised her. I said I handled part of it wrong. Her face softened just a little. "But what I found is real." And there it was. The softness vanished. She stepped back. "No. Emily, please listen to the recording. I'm not listening to some edited thing you got from God knows where. It's his voice. Brandon said you'd have something." "Of course he did," I said, and my own frustration leaked through. She flinched. Linda stepped in. "Sweetheart, nobody is trying to hurt you." Emily looked at her mother with tears in her eyes. "You already did." Then she turned and left. The front door closed softly, not slammed. Somehow that was worse. I wanted to run after her. Linda took my hand. "Don't. She thinks I betrayed her." "You did betray her privacy," Linda said gently. "Even if you were right." That one stung because I couldn't argue with it. I spent the rest of the day at the shop pretending to work. The service bay smelled like sheet metal old oil and the burnt dust that comes off furnaces the first time they kick on and fall. My guys knew better than to ask questions. I sat in my office with Brandon's voice in my head and Emily's hurt face in front of me. By 4 o'clock, I called Marty. "I need one more favor." He sighed. "Ray retired." "Not that." Using the pickup address, Marty's booking notes, and a little public information that wasn't hard to find, we identified Tara Vance. She worked remotely most days from a coffee shop in the East Village, the kind of place with exposed brick and $8 muffins. I drove there myself the next morning. No disguise this time. Tara was sitting near the window with a laptop open, one ankle hooked around the leg of her chair. When she saw me, she looked annoyed first, then afraid. "You," she said. I sat across from her. "My name is Rick Halstead." All the color went out of her face. She started packing her laptop. "I don't know what you think you heard." "I heard enough, and I recorded enough." She stopped moving. I kept my voice low. "I know you helped him. I know you're part of it. But I also know something else." "What?" "He's lying to you too." Her jaw tightened. "You don't know anything about me." "No," I said. "But I know men like Brandon. They don't stop using people just because one of them thinks she's special." That landed. She sat back down slowly. For the next half hour, Tara talked. Not because she was good, not because she was sorry. She talked because she was angry. She and Brandon had been together for years. High school sweethearts, more or less. She had waited while he built his real estate career. She had helped him with close contacts, even some of his debts. Brandon had promised her that once he got positioned, they would have the life they deserved. Then came Emily. Not by accident. Tara had seen an interview with me in a local business magazine. There was a family photo. Emily's name was in the caption. Finding her online had been easy. Brandon approached her later at a charity education event in Des Moines. My daughter had thought it was fate. It had been research. Tara showed me texts, photos, voice notes, a spreadsheet named Asset Path. My hands shook when I saw it. There were notes about Emily's habits, my business, our house, possible wedding gifts, legal timing, even phrases Brandon could use to make Emily see me as controlling. One line said, "Frame Rick as financial abuser if needed." I had to look away. Tara said he has papers ready. What papers? A starter home fund agreement. He wants Emily to sign after the engagement brunch. Says it's just to keep things organized. Sunday, after the brunch, he has a lawyer meeting Monday. We did not have months. We had days. Will you come forward, I asked. Tara laughed, but it cracked halfway through. No. He'll do this to her. He'll destroy me if I stand up in front of people. You helped build the trap. I know. Then help open it. She looked out the window, eyes shining but hard. I'll send you what I have, but I'm not walking into that room. That night, Emily texted me. Brandon thinks it's best if you don't make a speech at the brunch. I agree. Please don't embarrass me. I sat in my truck outside the shop under the yellow service bay light, reading those words again and again. I had spent my whole life fixing broken systems, but I had no idea how to fix my own daughter's trust. When I got home, Linda was waiting in the kitchen. If I speak too soon, I said I lose her. Linda nodded. And if I stay quiet, he gets her. She took my hand. Then we don't speak too soon, she said. We speak where he can't twist the room. So we decided. The engagement brunch would not be a celebration. It would be the place Brandon Cole finally met the truth in public. By Sunday morning, I had slept maybe 3 hours. Linda said I snored like a chainsaw when I was exhausted, but that night she told me I barely made a sound. I lay there staring at the ceiling fan, listening to the house settle, thinking about Emily walking into that brunch, believing she was about to celebrate her future. And I was about to break it open in front of everybody. That is the part people don't understand until they have children of their own. Saving someone does not always feel noble. Sometimes it feels cruel. Sometimes it feels like you are carrying the hammer yourself. The engagement brunch was at the Grant Wood Room, a private event space in Cedar Rapids with tall windows, polished wood floors, and framed prints of Iowa barns on the walls. Emily had picked it because it felt classy but not stiff. Her words. By the time Linda and I arrived, the room smelled like coffee, warm pastries, and fresh flowers. White tablecloths covered the round tables. There were little cards with Emily and Brandon's names printed in blue. A slideshow played near the front, showing pictures of them at pumpkin patches, restaurants, and some overlook in Des Moines, where Brandon had his arm around her like he had invented tenderness. I hated that picture most. Linda touched my sleeve. Breathe. I am. No, you're making that furnace noise. She was right. I let out a slow breath. Across the room, Emily stood beside Brandon near a table of mini quiches and fruit. She wore a soft green dress and pearl earrings I had bought her when she graduated college. She looked beautiful. She also looked nervous. When she saw me, her smile flickered. That hurt more than I expected. Brandon noticed too. He leaned down and said something in her ear. Emily nodded, but she did not come over. Brandon did. Mr. Halstead, he said, holding out his hand. Glad you could make it. His smile was perfect. His grip was firm. His eyes told me he thought he had already won. I shook his hand. Wouldn't miss it. He looked at Linda. Mrs. Halstead, you look lovely. Linda smiled politely. Thank you, Brandon. If you didn't know my wife, you would have thought she was calm. I knew better. Her left hand was closed tight around the small blue purse where she kept the flash drive Tara had sent. At first, everything went the way Brandon wanted. People hugged. They laughed. Linda's church friends praised the flowers. Emily's teacher co-workers gathered near the coffee urn and talked about classroom supplies. A few of my business friends slapped me on the back and made jokes about paying for a wedding. Marty Delgado was there too, pretending he had come as an old family friend, which was true enough. He gave me one careful nod from across the room. The evidence was ready. At least I thought it was. Brandon moved through the crowd like a man born for rooms like that. He remembered names. He asked one of Linda's friends about her hip replacement. He told Emily's principal that teachers were the last honest people in America. People ate it up. And I understood for one uncomfortable second why Emily had fallen for him. He was good. Not loud, not greasy, not obvious. Good. He came across like the kind of young man older folks want to believe still exists. Respectful, ambitious, clean cut. The kind who says yes, ma'am, and helps carry folding chairs. That made what I knew feel even uglier. About 40 minutes in, Brandon tapped a spoon against his champagne glass. Can I have everybody's attention? The room quieted. Emily looked up at him with soft eyes and I almost lost my nerve. Brandon took her hand. I just want to thank all of you for being here, he said. Emily and I are blessed to have people around us who believe in love, family, and trust. Trust. I felt Linda's shoulder brush mine. Brandon continued. I know marriage isn't just about romance. It's about patience, respect, boundaries. It's about two people choosing each other, even when the world gets noisy. A few people nodded. Then he smiled toward me. And I know fathers sometimes have a hard time letting go of the steering wheel. There was polite laughter. My ears went hot. Emily glanced at me embarrassed. Brandon raised his glass. But I hope with time we can all learn to trust that Emily knows her own heart. People clapped. He had done it beautifully. He had made himself the reasonable one, and me the overbearing father without saying one ugly word. For a second I saw the room through Emily's eyes. Her father had spied. Her fiancé had forgiven. Her father looked tense. Her fiancé looked calm. People believed the calm person. Brandon had said that in the car. My stomach turned. Linda leaned close. Rick. I looked at her. She whispered, now. I checked my phone. There was a message from Tara. I can't come. I'm sorry. I can't do this. My chest tightened. I showed Linda. Her face changed, but only for a moment. Then she opened her purse and pressed the flash drive into my palm. She sent everything, Linda whispered. She may be a coward, but she's an angry coward. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny exactly, but because after 35 years, Linda still knew how to keep me standing. Marty moved toward the small laptop connected to the projector. We had arranged it earlier with the venue manager under the excuse of showing a family video. I nodded once. Then I picked up the thick white folder from our table. Linda had tied it with a blue ribbon. Her idea. Paper scares men like him, she had said, so give him paper. I walked to the front of the room. Emily's eyes widened. Dad, she said quietly. I took the microphone from its stand. My daughter asked me not to make a speech today, I began. A few people chuckled, unsure. And honestly, she was probably right to ask. Emily's cheeks flushed. I looked at her, not Brandon. I owe you an apology, Em. I let fear push me into doing something I'm not proud of. I went looking for trouble because I didn't trust what I couldn't see. Brandon smiled faintly. He thought I was surrendering. I turned to him and held out the folder. But I did bring Brandon an early wedding gift. The room laughed lightly. Brandon hesitated, then took it. What's this? He asked. Open it. His fingers pulled the ribbon loose. He flipped the folder open. The first page was a photo of him kissing Tara outside the boutique hotel. His smile died. Emily stepped closer. Brandon. He turned the page. Screenshots. Texts. The EH Asset Path spreadsheet. The draft starter home agreement. A credit report showing hidden debt he had never mentioned. A printed note from his own file frame Rick as controlling if needed. Emily reached for the folder, but Brandon pulled it back. That's private, he snapped. The room went still. There it was, the mask slipped. I said into the microphone, private is an interesting word for a plan that involved my daughter. Brandon looked at the crowd. This is insane. He's been harassing me. He hired people. He's trying to ruin me because he can't control Emily anymore. Some murmurs moved through the room. I nodded. I expected that. Marty clicked the laptop. For a moment the speakers hissed. Then came road noise. A turn signal. A faint radio voice talking about the Hawkeyes' offensive line. Then Brandon's voice filled the room. Emily is not the goal. Emily is the door. Emily froze. Linda reached for her, but Emily didn't move. The recording continued. If I make the prenup sound like her father's idea, she'll hate it. A woman near the coffee urn gasped. We push for a family gift, a starter home. Once my name is on it, we have shared property. Brandon lunged toward the laptop, but Marty stepped in front of him. Easy, Marty said. Lots of witnesses. Brandon pointed at me. That's edited. I said, then let's compare it to the text. The projector changed. There were messages between Brandon and Tara, time-stamped blunt and ugly. Tara, she still doesn't know you knew about her dad. Brandon, she thinks she hid it. That's why this works. Tara, what about after the wedding? Brandon, assets first, feelings later. Emily made a sound I hope I never hear again. Not a sob. Something smaller, like the air leaving her. Brandon turned to her. Emily, listen to me. Tara's unstable. She's obsessed with me. A voice from the back of the room said, funny. That's what you said you'd call me. Every head turned. Tara stood in the doorway. She looked pale, angry, and terrified all at once. Her hands shook around her phone. Brandon stared at her. Tara, don't. She walked in slowly. No, she said. You don't get to use that voice on me now. Emily looked between them. Who are you? Tara's face softened for the first time. I'm sorry, she said. Not enough, but I am. Then she faced the room. Brandon and I have been together for years. He told me Emily was temporary. He said marrying her was how we got the life we deserved. Brandon's face twisted. You helped. I did, Tara said. And then I realized you were planning to use me too. She lifted her phone. You taught me to keep receipts. That line landed like a gavel. Brandon looked around the room, searching for one friendly face. He found none. Emily slowly took the engagement ring off her finger. Her hands were steady, though her face was white. She walked to the champagne table, picked up Brandon's glass, and dropped the ring into it. The tiny clink seemed louder than the recording. You wanted something expensive from my family, she said. Keep that. It's the last thing you'll ever get from us. Brandon opened his mouth, but no words came. For once, the calm man had nothing calm to say. He turned toward the exit. I stepped in front of him. I didn't touch him. I didn't threaten him. I didn't need to. You're going to walk out of here, I said quietly, with everyone knowing exactly who you are. His eyes flicked over the silent room. My daughter, my wife, his boss near the wall, Emily's friends, my friends, Tara still holding her phone. All of them watching. That, I said, is more than enough for me. And for the first time since I had met him, Brandon Cole looked small. Brandon didn't say another word as he walked out. No shouting, no threats. Just that quiet, stunned look men get when they finally understand they've been seen clearly and there's no way to talk their way out of it. The door closed behind him and the room stayed silent for a few seconds longer than it should have. Then people started moving again. Not loudly, not dramatically, just small, careful motions. Someone set down a coffee cup. Someone else pulled out a chair. A woman near the back shook her head and whispered something to her husband. Life doesn't explode the way it does in movies. It settles, awkward, uneven. Emily stood in the middle of it all, staring at the glass where her engagement ring sat at the bottom, like something dropped and forgotten. Linda stepped beside her slowly. Sweetheart, she said. Emily didn't look at her. She didn't cry right away either. That worried me more than anything. I need some air, Emily said quietly. She walked past me without stopping. That hurt, but I let her go. Linda squeezed my arm. Give her a minute. I nodded. Across the room, Tara was still standing near the doorway, like she wasn't sure if she had the right to be inside anymore. I walked over. She flinched a little when I got close. You did the right thing, I said. She let out a shaky breath. I didn't do it for the right reasons. Sometimes that's all people have. She gave a weak, tired smile. I sent your wife everything she said. There's more than what you showed. I know. I'm leaving town, she added. He's not the kind of man who lets things go. I studied her for a moment. She wasn't wrong. You take care of yourself, I said. She nodded once and walked out, not looking back. Marty came up beside me and clapped my shoulder lightly. Well, he said that was one way to spend a Sunday morning. I managed a small smile. Appreciate your help. You ever want to make this Ray thing permanent? I got weekend shifts. Don't encourage him, Linda called from across the room. He already thinks he's undercover law enforcement. A few people laughed. The tension loosened just a notch. But none of that mattered. My eyes stayed on the door Emily had walked through. I found her outside behind the building, standing near a row of bare trees that lined the parking lot. The wind had picked up, tugging at her hair, lifting the hem of her dress. She had her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold something in place. I stopped a few feet away. Emily. She didn't turn right away. When she did, her eyes were red but still dry. Was I stupid, she asked? That question went straight through me. No, I said, you were trusting. She shook her head. I missed everything, all of it. You didn't miss it, I said. He hid it. He didn't hide everything, she said. You saw it. I went looking for it. She looked down at her hands. Was any of it real, she asked. That was the harder question. I could have lied. I could have said no, that Brandon had been fake from the start, that every smile, every word, every moment was part of a plan. But I've learned something in 58 years. Truth matters more when it hurts a little. Your feelings were real, I said. That's what matters. His intentions weren't. Her lips pressed together. A tear finally slipped down her cheek. I let him in, she whispered. I took a step closer, careful. You let someone you cared about into your life. That's not a mistake. That's what people do. She laughed, but it broke halfway through. God, I can hear him in my head even now. Telling me you're controlling. Telling me you'd try something like this. I know. And I believed him. That's because he was good at what he does. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. You went behind my back. There it was. I did, I said. That hurt. I know. She looked at me, then really looked. Why didn't you just tell me? Because I was afraid you wouldn't listen. And you thought this was better, she asked, gesturing toward the building. No, I said honestly. I thought this was necessary. We stood there in the wind for a moment. I'm still mad at you, she said. I expect you to be. She nodded slowly. But she hesitated like the word itself was heavy. You saved me. I swallowed. I'd rather have you mad at me and safe, I said, than happy for a little while and hurt for a long time. She stepped forward then and wrapped her arms around me. Not like a little girl. Not like someone who needed to be carried. Just close. I held her back, feeling how steady she was even in the middle of all that. After a minute, she pulled away. I need some time, she said. You take all the time you need. She nodded and went back inside with Linda. I stayed outside a little longer, letting the wind cool my face. Inside, the brunch ended in pieces. People left in small groups. Some came over to shake my hand. Some didn't know what to say and just gave me a look that said enough. Brandon's boss slipped out early. I noticed that. Consequences have a way of arriving quietly. A few days later, I heard through the same circles that Brandon's deals had started drying up. Calls not returned, meetings canceled. Nobody said it outright, but in towns like ours, word moves faster than any contract. I didn't have to do anything. Truth did the work. Emily stayed at our house the first 2 nights. She didn't talk much, just sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea Linda kept refilling. Sometimes she would start to say something, then stop. On the 3rd day, she went back to her apartment. I don't want to hide from it, she said. I helped her carry groceries up the stairs. We didn't talk about Brandon. Not yet. A week later, she came by the shop. That surprised me. She stood in the doorway of my office, looking around at the same place she used to visit when she was a kid. The smell hadn't changed. Oil dust metal, and that faint, burnt smell that comes from old heating systems. You still haven't fixed that flickering light, she said, nodding at the overhead fixture. I've been busy, I said. She smiled a little. I got a message from him, she said. I leaned back in my chair. What did he say? That you manipulated everything. That Tara lied. That the recording was taken out of context. That you're trying to control my life. I nodded. Sounds like him. I almost replied, she admitted. What stopped you? She reached into her bag and pulled out a few printed pages. The same ones from the folder. I read this again, she said. Not as your daughter, just as me. And I realized something. What's that? He didn't make one mistake, she said. He made a plan. I let that sit. Then she said I blocked him. Something in my chest loosened that I hadn't even realized was tight. I'm proud of you, I said. She shrugged. Don't be. It took me too long. No, I said. It took you exactly as long as it needed to. A couple weeks passed. Life started to settle. Emily went back to teaching. She moved into a smaller apartment closer to her school. She adopted an older rescue dog named Biscuit, who followed her around like she had always been his person. Linda went back to worrying about normal things, groceries, church events, whether I was eating too much red meat. One evening, Emily and I ended up at Hy-Vee together grabbing a few things for dinner. Nothing special, just normal. In the parking lot, we loaded bags into the back of my truck. I hated you for a couple days, she said suddenly. I know. I'm still not thrilled about the fake driver thing. I smiled. Your mother said the mustache took 10 years off her respect for me. Emily laughed. A real laugh this time. Then she closed the tailgate and leaned against it. But you were right, she said. And I needed someone to be right even if I didn't want to hear it. I nodded. You won't always need me to do that, I said. She looked at me. I know. We stood there a moment longer, just father and daughter in a grocery store parking lot, the kind of place where nothing important is supposed to happen. And yet somehow everything had. Months later, we had a small barbecue in the backyard. Corn on the cob, burgers, the Hawkeyes game on inside, Biscuit sleeping under the table like he'd always belonged there. Emily laughed with Linda about something I didn't hear. Linda came out carrying a napkin. Rick, she said sweetly, I found something of yours. She set it on the table. The fake mustache. Emily stared at it for half a second, then burst out laughing. I shook my head. I'm never living that down. Not a chance, Linda said. And as I sat there listening to my daughter laugh again, I realized something simple. You can't protect your children from every mistake. You can't steer their lives forever. But sometimes when something is built to break them, you step in even if it costs you a piece of how they see you. If you were in my place, would you have stayed quiet and let her learn the hard way? Or would you have done what I did and risked losing her trust to keep her safe? I'm not sure there's a perfect answer. But I know the one I chose.